Okay, so last time we talked about chapter one, and now we're talking about Hank Rearden in chapter two. So, chapter two is called The Chain, and Rearden Metal, if you remember from chapter one, is this guy is making his own alloy, which is supposed to be stronger and better than steel. And Taggart Transcontinental, which is the railroad, the main focus of this book, with Dagny Taggart, vice president of operations, and her brother James Taggart running the family railroad. And they're in a bit of trouble because they just built a Mexican line, railroad line, and it's cost them $40 million and it's not making any money. In the meanwhile, their own railroad's failing on one of their most profitable stretches, the Rio Norte. And so they need to get this back up and running. So Dagny fights with her brother James a little bit, gets him to agree to sign on and get Hank Rearden to use his product, which nobody's wanted to test. Everybody's skeptical. Nobody wants to believe it's better than steel. So I was skeptical too. And then I go into this chapter and I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. Like Hank Rearden is the man. This guy is so awesome, right? Here he is making this brand new metal. And the chapter starts and he's pouring malt. They're pouring molten lava and molten steel rather, and they're doing a heat and they're creating his alloy and creating his product, and he's just sitting there kind of just watching this all go down, all these years of hard work. And then they talk about how this guy Hank Rearden, owner of Rearden Metal or Rearden Steel or whatever, this guy has started in the iron mines at 14 years old, and then by 30 he had bought these mines. And then when he bought them, he started creating an alloy of metal, of different metals, to create something stronger and better than steel. And it took him a decade. He just nonstop pouring and testing and pouring and testing, and interrupted dinners and interrupted events and all this stuff. Like the second he had an idea, he had to go and he had to just get to work. And he worked his ass off. So sort of walking at home, and he's got his hand in his pocket and he's holding this chain. The chain is the first thing he made off of the Rearden Metal, this sort of like bracelet sort of chain. And he's just playing with it in his pocket while we go through all the different things he did to get to where he is now, all the hard work he put in. And then when we finally get to a place where he's done it, when we finally get to a place where Hank Rearden has accomplished this feat of making Rearden Metal, which is stronger and better than any other metal, we get to this quote. And it says, "Then the day when it was done, and its result was called Rearden Metal. These were the things that had come to white heat, had melted and fused with him, and their alloy was a strange, quiet feeling that made him smile at the countryside in the darkness and wonder why happiness could hurt." I thought that was just a really amazing line right there, a way to describe how Hank Rearden himself is an alloy of all of his experience and his feelings and the grit and the toughness and the determination it took to get this product finally there, this vision into reality. And now, finally, Dagny Taggart, who's a very sensible girl, very sensible lady, she's like, I'm going with this guy. He's got the gumption I want. And at first, I wasn't sure because her brother was arguing with her in that last chapter. But then I got to this chapter and I'm like, wow, this guy is something else. Like, busting his ass in the mines at 14, owning them by 30, and then creating this amazing alloy across a decade. So he walks home, he gets to his house, and he goes inside, and we get introduced to his mother and his wife's very like sarcastic. She's always joking around, but in a way that just sort of she just throws her like digs at her husband. because he's always working, he's always doing stuff. So she's throwing these digs at him, and you can tell like everybody's kind of a dick to this guy. And here he is. He's wealthy, he's rich, self-made man. He's very productive. And here he is just pouring the first bit of Rearden Metal tonight. And then he comes home and his family doesn't even give a crap. They're walking around the room, they're talking about nonsense, and they don't seem to give any shits that this guy has just poured um, the first bit of Rearden Metal. So, his mom's, busting his beans about how she doesn't let her ever feed him, and his wife's busting his beans about how he works late and he doesn't really care about crap and all this other stuff. And he's kind of bored, but he's really nice to these people. He's trying to be nice. He supports them with his money. And none of these people are excited for him. It's really like infuriating. You're reading it and you're like, what is wrong with these people? But you're like, I love this guy. I love this Hank Rearden dude. And so also his friend Paul Larkin is there, and Paul Larkin and his brother Philip. So Paul Larkin is there. Paul Larkin will come in later in the book. So pay attention to him. Paul Larkin comes and just drops by, and he's talking about how Hank needs to, get his image right and, sort of rehabilitate his image because all he cares about is being productive. So he's not playing the political game. He's like, I'm putting out a great product. Why do I need to play politics? And his friend's like, oh, you got to have people sell you, make you look good. And this guy Hank's like, I don't care. Like, I'm busy. I'm focused. Like, I'm not gonna, spend a bunch of time, doing unproductive things and focused on take my focus away from my work and the people that I serve and the people who are going to benefit from this product so that I can appease a few people in Washington and other people in the industry who aren't happy with my success and the fact that I'm producing and they're not. So this guy Paul Larkin really pleaded with him about that. And so that's interesting to know because you're going to want to keep that in mind for the next chapter. But he's sitting with his family, and it was very interesting because um, there's this part I'm going to read you now. What did they seek from him? Thought Rearden. What were they after? He's talking about his family now. He had never asked anything of them. It was they who wished to hold him, they who pressed a claim on him. And the claim seemed to have the form of affection, but it was a form which he found harder to endure than any sort of hatred. It's pretty interesting. He despised causeless affection just as he despised unearned wealth. They professed to love him for some unknown reason, and they ignored all the things for which he could wish to be loved. That was my favorite quote from the chat. I got so excited, almost ran around my room. They professed to love him for some unknown reason, and they ignored all the things for which he could wish to be loved. I feel that way about myself a lot of times, right? Like I get all excited about these things, learning and growing and studying stuff and having different experiences, but then the people who you love and that love you tend to not value those parts of you. And then there you are so excited about these other things and you're totally willing to share that with them and they don't care. So yeah, it's like these people love you, but you don't even know why. So I thought that was really relatable. And it's then this kind of is a real glimpse about his family, this Hank Rearden dude. Is like, did he like them? No, he thought he had wanted to like them, which was not the same. So clearly he doesn't like his family. He might love them, but he doesn't like them, and it's not the same thing, right? So the end of the chapter was pretty interesting because his brother Philip is, whining and moaning. Clearly, his mom like babies his brother Philip, and Hank's this successful money grubber out there. Despite the fact that they all live off of him, it doesn't matter because, you know, he just cares about money and not the family. And so Philip's there whining and bitching and moaning and talking about how basically he needs to, make all this money for Friends of Global Progress. $10,000 he's got to raise. And he hasn't gotten anybody to sign up because I don't know, people don't care about this, that, and the other thing. So his family is basically telling Hank that they don't care and things are tough for Philip. So Hank says, "Listen, come by the office tomorrow. I'll throw you a check for 10,000. Done, all done, bang." And his friend Paul's like, "Oh no, you shouldn't have gave your brother that money." And then his wife says this, "But you're wrong, Paul. You're so wrong. What would happen to Henry's vanity if he didn't have us to throw alms to?" So that's money or food that you give to poor people, alms. "What would become of his strength if he didn't have weaker people to dominate? What would he do with himself if he didn't keep us around as dependents? It's quite all right, really. I'm not criticizing him. It's just a law of human nature." So she took the metal bracelet and held it up, letting it glitter in the lamplight. "A chain," she said. "Appropriate, isn't it? It's the chain by which he holds us all in bondage." That's how the chapter ends. So I thought it was pretty interesting how it was pretty crazy that this guy just, made this metal and it's is producing all this great work and his family just, I don't know, it's like they see him as this guy using his power to keep them all prisoner. And I can see that from their angle, but this guy's awesome. And you know, his family just doesn't give a crap. And it always stinks when you're surrounded by people who aren't passionate about the stuff you're passionate about. I've read more of the chapters, obviously. I talked about that in video one, in chapter one. Though I'm only going to give spoilers per chapter and my thoughts on each chapter. I read five, so I'm going to try to get these up a little bit more fresh, like right when I read them. I just didn't have this channel yet or anything. So yeah, I'm going to try to get each chapter up when I read them. I'm going to do 3, 4, and 5. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to continue reading. And then as I read them, I'll give my thoughts in a more right in the moment type of deal. So stay tuned for those. It's good to just talk about what you felt, what you're thinking, the different things. It was really good to, you know, learn what a heat of steel was, to hear the description of, how the long strip of white metal, molten metal coming down was like the color of the sun, the sparks going everywhere, like, children's sparklers. Really, really cool descriptions that she puts in and how she got to an alchemical level with it and then blended that into her character, sort of like in Harry Potter where he's an alloy. So, yeah, it's very cool. We will continue to track on.